Now, taking Banyana to the World Cup for the first time in history, how was that experience? And this is what I want to be. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. You're listening to the Maryam Mkwanda show on Salam Media. It is 12:35 on this Wednesday, the 9th of December 2020. The 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign is a United Nations campaign annually, which takes place annually from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. Since its inception in South Africa in 1998, incidents of violence against women and children have increased. This raises questions like, is this campaign even necessary? Is it helping? What is the purpose of this campaign? Joining me on the other side is Shuhaida Adam, Councillor from Islamic Care Line, to talk more about this topic of 16 Days of Activism and Gender-Based Violence. Assalamu alaikum, Shuhaida.
Alaikum salam. How are you, Sister Maryam?
Alhamdulillah, all well. Yourself?
Alhamdulillah. Always a pleasure to be on your show and to discuss current topics that's happening in the world.
Likewise, it's always a pleasure to have you, but unfortunately not in studio this time. But the show must go on, alhamdulillah. All right, so Shuhaida, let's start first. I mean, we all know what the 16 Days of Activism is. And for those who may not, I just shared what it is all about. It is to raise awareness against violence of women and children. And there's a whole history on this. You know, when we go back to the history, where did this idea come about? It comes from a massacre where I forgot his name, but this man murdered women, and it was
three sisters.
He massacred.
Yes, the Mirabelle sisters.
Yes, that massacre, and the women were killed, and because he didn't want feminists, so he had this idea of he does not want the world to have feminists, so he's going to kill some of them right now. But anyways, how does it affect families? How does gender-based violence affect families?
You know, when we talk gender-based violence in the 16 days specifically, those who are on it, we really use this time to educate people about the impact of it. And when we talk about families, we first of all understand that the understanding of families, the definition of families has changed a lot. So, you know, that the 16 days actually only started being commemorated in 1991. And I think back then society also was still a bit traditional. You still had your traditional families together. So it was, you know, your mother, your father, the two little children and the dog, the family dog thing. Families have really changed. So we have such different compositions of families that the impact of GBV, it's impacted on families in terms of behavior, but also on the family structure. So the family is not necessarily your nuclear family anymore because of GBV, and often because it's not a nuclear family, then we do have GBV coming up in our communities. So one of the big things, one of the major impact is that it leads to the breakdown of the family structure. So if you had the couple and they have their children in the home, and when GBV is present, and then it can lead to the breakdown of the family structure. Then within the family itself, right? So if the family is still intact, so children growing up in a violent home, children growing up in an abusive home, so it's not necessarily even physical abuse, it may be other forms of abuse, so emotional abuse, neglect on the children also, because 16 days of activism, it includes child abuse, right? Mm-hmm. And one act that we really need to highlight to families and to parents is that neglect of a child is also an act of abuse. It has serious consequences. So emotionally also, we have children who they suffer from very low self-esteem, they have extreme anxiety, they may present other mental health disorders, they themselves have anger management issues, they have unable to focus in school, so poor academic record. Also, just in terms of their own development, children who are under very difficult circumstances, they don't develop on path. So when they reach certain ages, they're supposed to be able to do certain tasks, they're supposed to be able to master certain behaviors. And when they are growing up in an environment that doesn't allow for that, and where it's a very unhealthy and a very fearful environment, they're not going to develop as they should, which then holds them back in terms of the emotional development, in terms of their social skills development. So oftentimes children who come from abusive homes, they struggle to make friends. Or when they do have friends, their social interactions with their friends are also quite harmful. It's quite hurtful. So that's one of the impacts that you'll often see at schools also. And then, long-term wise also, when their own understanding of relationships, especially young women, when as a girl they are exposed to very violent behavior at home, oftentimes this is then their understanding of what a marriage should be, or how a partner treats his partner and how they should then be treated. And they are more likely to then end up in a violent relationship themselves, and they are more likely to end up being controlled or to end up in vulnerable situations. And then it just sort of repeats that cycle of violence also. Also, other social behaviors that children who come from violent homes or abusive homes that they pick up is self-harm behaviors and substance abuse or alcohol disorders. They turn to drugs, they turn to very negative behaviors just to as a means of escape of what is going on at home. So it's not just about the couple, it's also the family environment. And the two big consequences, of course, is when the family does break down, and then we have the split family home. And oftentimes when the family breaks down, because most often, unfortunately, it is the male partner who's the violent partner. So the children don't end up seeing him, and they then grow up without a father figure. And growing up without a father figure in their life, if you do not have a father figure to replace the absent father, that leads to, again, further social complications, further social issues. And then on a community level also, we tend to then have more crime in our communities, unsafe communities, and undeveloped communities. Young people unable to reach their full potential because they do not have a stable foundation in their childhood.
So it's like a chain reaction. It starts with in the family. So once it starts in the family, it's easy to get out and affect the entire makeup of not just the family but also the community. And this too, especially if the person is well known in the community, and it also affects the community in that regard. Now, this 16 days of activism campaign, like, I'm finding it difficult to accept that it is necessary, it is working, it is it's doing the things that it's supposed to do, because since it started in 1998, more violence against women and children have been reported. I mean, we recently learned about that as well during the nationwide lockdown. So, do these campaigns help? Are they helping? What are the impact of such campaigns?
Short term, I do see a difference.
Yeah.
Short term, engaging with people in that 16 days, there's often a renewed commitment that we will attempt behavior change, or we are going to support organizations that are part of this. We will reach out to people that we know who are experiencing. So there is sort of, it serves as a means of, I suppose, as also renewing people's commitment to the campaign. However, the whole idea behind 16 days was to get people to, first of all, become aware of it. And then as the campaigns have evolved, so I mean, what happened in 1998, the setting was very different in all the countries. So 16 days, it's from the United Nations level down. So every country that belongs to the United Nations, they're supposed to honor this campaign. So what happened, South Africa started in 1998. Our context back then was very different. Where we are right now, also, South Africa has come a long way. Many people regard South African laws as being the most progressive. So in terms of our Criminal Act, in terms of our Domestic Violence Act, and I believe the new GBV Act should be coming up sometime in the future. There's a bill that's still in play in Parliament, and there's something that's coming up. So the idea behind 16 days is, of course, to raise awareness. Again, every year there's new people that we have to reach out to educate them, to dispel myths relating to gender equality, dispel myths relating to relationships, etc. And it's also supposed to be a means of sharing with people what they can access for the rest of the year. So 16 days is just a short campaign to share what are your rights, what is available for you, and get a commitment from people that we're going to support the end to violence for the rest of the year. Especially corporate companies, 16 days, even the media, they come on board very, very, very strongly on 16 days. However, especially at Islamic Airline, when we call someone on board for 16 days, we get a commitment from them that for the next year, this is what we're going to do. 16 days is a short little period in time. And then the rest of the campaign and the rest of the work has to still carry on. I know the South African government also, they a few years ago, they also put that it's 365 days of no violence against women and children. So 16 days is a short period, and we're then supposed to carry on the work. Unfortunately, like you said, also the numbers have risen. The violence is extreme, especially in South Africa. Other countries, they do experience also other forms of abuse that we may not necessarily see, but it's there and it carries on through the year. So it just highlights also that this is just a short-term highlighting campaign and education and awareness campaign, and to renew commitment and to share with people what they can do, what's happening, what's new, what resources can they access, but the work has to carry on. So the long-term intervention, it can start from here and it will carry on, and you can evaluate after a year or 2 years. But it's also just like we said, 16 days is a lovely day, a lovely time to share with people about the long-term interventions that they can access.
And what do we need to do? What needs to be done for such campaigns to become impactful, besides just talking about it and saying, okay, guys, it's now the 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. And some people get excited and start going on a killing spree as if such a campaign is it's just word of mouth. It's just a sentence. It doesn't mean anything.
Yes, no, you're right. Sometimes it felt, I think, for a good few years, around 16 days, there was an increase in this extreme violence against women and children. There were children who were being gruesomely murdered, and it almost felt like 16 days served as a trigger for the perpetrators to then attack women or these children and to do extreme gruesome acts towards them. It felt like that at some point. However, I think, when we talk about how can people get involved, there's so many ways that an individual can do, and then also just in terms of the families. For me, the family is where it starts. And if we look at some of the causes and the reasons why we have gender-based violence, is that when we start with our children, the home they are socialized in, and their understanding of society, their understanding of gender interactions, their understanding of relationships, it starts from small. Even the cultural beliefs that we hold. So we have to dispel harmful cultural beliefs and beliefs that the boy child is more superior to the girl child, the sisters are meant to serve their brothers, and those harmful cultural beliefs that men are more superior to women, the husband should be in control, a good husband or a good man is one whose wife is disciplined and who knows how to discipline his family, and he has the right to use physical violence. So we have to dispel all of that myths, and where we dispel that, the best place is again in the home when our children are growing up. So if they start with that beliefs, and if they already start their social interactions on a very healthy note, they will then in the future have positive interactions with other women, with other children as they grow older. And then that's how we make a difference. I know there's a very common saying that safer homes lead to safer communities. And it's so true. If we have safe homes and if we are interacting in safe manners, and if we teach our children also how they can cope with challenges. So having a safer home and showing them how to react to certain challenges that come their way, or when people are not necessarily going to be friendly to them, or people are not always going to agree with them, how do they cope with that? How do they cope with rejection? How do they cope with not getting what they want from other people in a very healthy way? If we give them healthy coping skills from young, they will not then go out and force people to behave a certain way with them, force women to be in relationships with them, force rape upon a woman, force many behaviors. and they will learn to respect people also. So again, the critical factor in fighting GBV starts with the home. So I think people who have families and are raising children and soon will in the future have a family, or caregivers, even if you're raising grandchildren or neighbors' children, reaching out to young people and engaging with them, having a positive social interaction with young people can make such a difference. There was a study done, Professor in Pretoria, she was a social worker also, and she studied a community in Northern Cape. And at that time, this community, there were quite a few men who were perpetrating acts of rape on babies. So she studied in this community. Why did certain men of this community, they all grew up under similar circumstances, right? So there was poverty, there was alcoholism, there was broken families. Why did certain men go ahead and perpetrate such extreme crimes towards children? And why did other people who also grew up in similar neighborhoods, why did they not do it? And the critical factor she found was that the ones who did not go on to commit crimes as adults was that they had a significant male role model. So this is based on that community in the Northern Cape. It wasn't a father. It could have been a teacher. It could have been another family member. It could have been a community leader. But the significant role model in that child's life was the difference in that community between going ahead and perpetrating extreme violent behavior and not. So it starts with the family. So people who are, even if you don't have children and you know of young people, engage with them, talk to them, advise them, and just build a relationship. It's going to make such a difference. On a bigger community level, so where communities are together and where there's a bit of a structure, so if there's, for example, a community safety forum, share resources. So go around, get to know the people around, get to understand what type of families are in your communities, what type of homes, Is it multiple generations living in a home? Are there difficulties? Are there social difficulties? Is there drug addiction in a certain home? Share with them resources. I think one of the key things also is people's access to resources. So oftentimes people don't know what's in their own community. They often think they have to go to the big city or they have to go to town to an organization there. And there might just be services that are there in their community. So one of the things also is to make things accessible for other people. This year also with COVID, there wasn't so many big events. Just more smaller events. People had online events also. So supporting organizations who are working in the field of GBV, people who are running shelters, if you know of an organization who's running a shelter, if you can do donations to them, donations of things like toiletries, children's products, education material, etc., just supporting through donations. Many NGOs, they were not able to sustain themselves now during lockdown. So it's quite scary to think that such critical help that's needed, and if they had to close during lockdown, where do people go and who do they access help with? So I know also in rural areas, it's very, very difficult to get access to resources. So even if communities can come together and show some resourcefulness, our rural communities, although they don't have set resources, they themselves, the individuals who live there, they have their own ways of working things. They have their own ways of resolving things. So on a community level also, if there's, your unofficial community leaders and people that the community trusts, if they can also reach out to people and make it known that this behavior is unacceptable, we don't accept violent behavior, and that there will be consequences. Even if you don't necessarily, the consequence, sometimes the justice system, unfortunately, it's not where it should be, even though we have the laws, implementation is leaves a lot to be desired on many, many levels. So even if it's not necessarily the consequences that the person will face in terms of formal justice, however, like we said earlier, the other consequences, the unspoken consequences that's going to happen, that's going to occur, whether we know really about it, whether we understand right now, or long term, we'll eventually see also the long term consequences. So it's just support them. And then also people who know someone who is in a harmful relationship, who is experiencing domestic violence, and this is for men and women. 16 days focuses mostly on women because women are the greater victims. However, we do understand and we do know that men are also experiencing abuse. So reaching out and sharing with them also where they can access resources. Also just sharing with them that as a friend, you can be there for them, not to tell them what to do, not to force them into situations that they don't want to be in, but to also share with them that their life is at risk. And any woman who is in a violent relationship, And if she hasn't left, she needs to have a backup plan. She needs to have a safety plan, a plan of action. What is she going to do if things get out of control? And she can see now her life is at risk, her children's life is at risk. So the shelters always talk about having a bag packed and kept in a safe place, a bag in case you need to flee. You need to flee for your life. And we don't want women who still get caught, trying to take important documents or packing clothing or things. And then that can be the difference between whether they survive or not. So it's better to be prepared. And most women who are in violent relationships, they can read their partners. They come to learn the pattern. They know when to expect violence. So be ready, be prepared, know who you're going to call in terms of in times of emergency.
All right, Shuhaida, shukran. Time is not on our side. But please share contact details for Islamic Care Line in case anyone might be needing that information.
Okay, so in emergency situations, please don't call Islamic Care Line. We don't have an emergency line. Please call SAPS, your nearest SAPS or your emergency responses. You have to call them and they would be able to come through as soon as they can. For further information, call Islamic Care Line on 011 373 8080.
All right, shukran once again for your time and for sharing the important information with us. Have a wonderful day. Assalamu alaikum.
Likewise. Wa alaikum salam.
That was Shuhaida Adam, a councillor at Islamic Airline, taking us through gender-based violence in South Africa. A lot of important information that she shared there. And if you'd like to find out more, you can visit Islamic Care Line on... they are based in Fordsburg, and well, just Google Islamic Care Line and you'll get all the information that you need. Do stay with us. We will be right back after the break.